Welcome. Thank you for coming. It's a great crowd. My name is Brianna Sittler. I'm the Director of Special Programs here at Bay Path College. One of the things I do is create the Kaleidoscope events, of which tonight is one. If you don't have a brochure, please pick one up. I'd love to see you at some of future events. If you're a student who's here for credit, sign in at one of the sign-in sheets at the table. At the end of the day, please grab a survey. I value your feedback. Leave it in the 2 baskets, and we will always work on your references, your recommendations, or desires. Just so you know, after tonight's event, there's a really interesting program. It came up very recently by the Student Events Committee. It's Harlan Cohen, and if you are interested in this New York Times best-selling author, he's a relationship expert advice columnist. So that will be downstairs at 9:30 in the Fireplace Lounge. Not related to me at all, but should be a lot of fun. Tonight, 9:30, student-run event. But we could have a great time. Come here, listen about, get educated on one thing, and go downstairs and get educated on something else. So if you have a cell phone, iPhone, please put it on vibe so it's not interrupting anybody during tonight's event. Again, Kaleidoscope event. There are restrooms over there. The only issue is there's no hand towels, so when you put on the air vents, it's really loud. So you can go down the stairs to the restrooms downstairs. Tonight should be about an hour and 15 minutes with question and answer. The flow is that I'll be introducing Diane. Diane will talk a little bit about tonight's event. She'll introduce each of our speakers. They'll talk for 5 or 6 minutes about what they do to help individuals after being incarcerated. And then there'll be some other questions, and then questions will be opened up to you on the floor. So with that, I'd like to invite Diane Hall up to the podium to do the real introductions. Help me welcome her. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to start off by thanking Brianna for all the behind-the-scenes work that she does. She does a terrific job with the Kaleidoscope series, and if it weren't for her, this event and other events wouldn't be held. So, Brianna, thank you very much. And as I look out over the audience, I see a nice diverse group. We have students, faculty, staff, and I also see a fair amount of people from the community. And it's really nice that people are interested in learning a little bit more about some of the issues that are affecting offenders as they're trying to reintegrate back into society and become a productive citizen once again, and to learn more about the challenges and barriers that they face, which are numerous. Tonight we'll be talking about offender reentry and recidivism and some of the challenges that they face. There's a great deal of stigma. There's a lot of barriers that offenders face, and it's something that the Sheriff's Department has been working really hard. And what's really neat about it is they're really working in a collaborative, interdisciplinary manner with several agencies around the community. And they're going to talk about some of those issues and programs. It's an honor for Bay Path College to have these 5 individuals who are each experts in their own right in their various disciplines with us here tonight to share their expertise and to help educate the surrounding communities on what they're doing. Before we begin the panel discussion, though, I would like to introduce each of them. Gentleman immediately to my left is Jack Fitzgerald. And I would like to also thank him for helping to put this panel together. He was instrumental in doing that. And next to him is Dr. Martha Lyman, and she is a walking encyclopedia of statistics. She is the research director for the Sheriff's Department, so if you're interested in any statistics, data, trends, now is the time. We'll give her a little test at the end in the Q&A, so go for it. And then we have Anthony Roberson, who has a lot of experience with direct care and working with the Sheriff's Department and with substance abuse issues. And then we have Sally Johnson Van Wright, who I would also like to thank for her assistance with this. She was kind of my point person and coordinated things on her end. So Sally, I appreciate that. Pleasure. And last but not least down there at the very end is Karen Dean, who the Sheriff's Department is really doing some innovative and creative things with housing. And she has a lot of experience in that area, and she is going to tell us what they're doing. And I think you'll be really surprised at the type of programming that they're working on. So Brianna gave you the overview of how this is going to unfold tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each individual, and they will, for 5 or 6 minutes, talk about their area and their perception of what some of the barriers and challenges are and some of what's being done. So first we have Jack Fitzgerald. After a 30-year practice as a clinical social worker, Jack joined the Hampden County Sheriff's Department as its clinical director. In that role, he was responsible for the clinical supervision and professional development of the counseling staff. In the summer of 2000, he was asked to assume responsibility for the day reporting and the after-incarceration support programs of the Sheriff's Department. In 2010, he retired, but if you know Jack, he didn't really retire. He's still there, and he now serves the Sheriff's Department as a consultant. And as you can see, he's here tonight, so retired people are very busy people. Two of his major priorities, and I love these, include the blending of the authority of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to compel treatment with the treatment needs of the offender and to work towards the goal of seeing the expression criminal justice system no longer be an oxymoron. I love that. So, Jack, 5 or 6 minutes. If you go over, I'll be sending up smoke signals or lightning bolts or...
Can you hear me okay back there? Okay, no, thank you. The sheriff and myself and my colleagues are really delighted to be here tonight to be able to present to you an overview of some of the things that we do. You know, a former police commissioner in the city of Springfield said something that I never forgotten, I think is very, very apropos. And what he said was, public safety is not a spectator sport. So I'm delighted to be able to have a chance, as are my colleagues and was the sheriff, to be able to come and talk to a cross-section of people about what we do in the Sheriff's Department in order to enhance public safety. Now, we are a public safety agency. That public safety is absolutely the ultimate value that informs all of our decisions and our judgments. Now, my assignment tonight is to be able to just simply frame the discussion that will be following. It's to lay out a little bit of the whys for the things that we do. My colleagues will talk about very briefly some of the interventions that we bring to bear. But why do we do it? Well, we have a mandate, as does every corrections agency, to be able to provide care and custody to people who are remanded to us by the courts. There are two very general populations that we're mandated to hold. First are those who are being held pre-trial, people whom the court has determined to be too dangerous to be held out in the community while they await trial. The other group of pretrial detainees is that group of people whom the court believes would be a significant flight risk or who are unable to make bail. The second major part of our population is that group of women and men who've been convicted of crimes and sentenced to incarceration. Now, they're sentenced to incarceration really for two reasons. One is punishment, and the other is rehabilitation. A few thoughts about punishment. You know, it's a very, I think, deeply felt human instinct that people who have harmed other people, people who have harmed the fabric of our communities, should be punished. And we need that, and so that capacity is enshrined in our laws with safeguards, but nonetheless, it is a valid part of what we're mandated to do. However, I would say to you that the major punishment involved in incarceration is the tremendous abridging of people's personal liberty. That's the punishment. We have a saying around the jail that people come to us as punishment, not for punishment, okay? Simply being incarcerated, living in an 80-square-foot cell, not being able to move without someone else's say-so, all of those kinds of things are tremendous in their sense of punishment. There are other punishments for our population that are a little bit more subtle. Such things, for example, as being forced and compelled to look up close and personal, if you will, at the harm that they've done to people. By and large, our people spend a lot of their life's energy in looking away from the negative impacts and the harm that they've done. And so, in many, many ways, we confront them with that, which is a very, very painful process. But it's an initial part of what has to happen in order to begin to bring about the other side of our mandate. See, we punish, but not for punishment in its own sake. It's punishment in the interest of change, of providing opportunities and forces to help people to change from criminal behavior to more pro-social behavior. And we have a whole system that has been devised to be able to do that. So as you listen tonight and you think about it, I know in your minds may be, some questions about, and you've undoubtedly heard it in conversation, I think probably most of us have. Well, they have it a lot better in jail than they ever had it in the street. And to a large extent, that's absolutely true, in the sense that many of our people for a long time and maybe never have had 3 decent meals, heat, light, a bed, an environment that doesn't have rats and other kinds of unwelcome visitors. That's all true. However, I would invite you to listen closely to what we say about what we're trying to do here, because more than 98%, and I won't get much into stats because 2 things, Marty's the statistician, and the other is I would trigger my own PTSD from graduate school thinking about statistics and research courses. But approximately 98% of these people are going to come home. They're going to come back to our neighborhoods. So the question is, how do we want them to come back? Do we want them to come back the way they were or worse? Or would we prefer to do what our name implies, namely correct and change? We're not called punitions. We're not called warehousers. We're called corrections people. And so everything that we do is in the interest of public safety by means of helping people by a system of carrots and sticks, as the sheriff says, the Bible and the gun, to be able to induce change and move people off of a criminal lifestyle into more pro-social behaviors. So I hope that you will clearly understand that the things that my colleagues are going to talk about, the programs that we provide, the services that we put out there are not hug-a-thug items. They're seriously in the interest of public safety. They're interested in being able to create taxpayers, not future victims. Why do we do this? Why do we do these things? So that these individuals who are sent to us will be less likely to rob your house or mug you or burgle your business or embezzle your funds or do any of the other things that have brought them into our care. So again, think about it. A lot of the things that we do are counterintuitive. They run against what common sense would say. So we need to look a little bit more deeply into human behavior to understand it in order to be able to change it. And so we've devised a system that's based on statistics, which help us to understand the population that we have. We have the ability to use these to create our programs and to reevaluate them. And we do this from the day somebody is incarcerated for life. People can access our service for the rest of their lives if they have ever been in touch with the criminal justice system. And again, this is in the interest of public safety and trying to do it in as fiscally responsible a way as we can. We have a serious mission given to us by the community, by the state. A lot of money and a lot of authority are invested in this, and we take it tremendously seriously. And we thank you for your interest tonight, and we hope that we'll have an informative and a lively discussion.
Thank you, Jack. Jack has such a bird's eye view and such a wide lens that he can look at these issues and talk about, and I could just sit and listen to him talk all day. But in the essence of time, I will move on and introduce Dr. Martha Lyman. Dr. Lyman graduated from McGill University from beautiful Montreal with a Bachelor of Science in Education in 1977. She received her Master's of Arts in Educational Psychology in 1995 and her Doctorate of Education in 2000 from American International College. Dr. Lyman has been the Research Director at the Hampden County Sheriff's Department since 2000. She has developed an integrated network of data sources that support the ongoing study of recidivism, program evaluations, and offender assessment, which is unprecedented at the county level. She's really doing some innovative work here. Her major interest is in the application of research and theory to correctional practice. Dr. Lyman served on the staff of the Massachusetts Governor's Commission on Corrections Reform in 2004 and the Urban Institute's Jail Reentry Roundtable in Washington, D.C. in 2006. She is the co-founder of the Massachusetts Criminal Justice Agency's research group and serves as an adjunct professor at 3 local colleges, teaching graduate courses in psychology, research, and criminal justice. Dr. Lyman?
Would you prefer us to go up there, or? Okay. It's my turn? Okay. Hi, good evening. When I came to the Sheriff's Department in 2000, basically I was given a handful of papers, a part-time, tiny little research study that my predecessor, who was a part-timer, had done and shown in office and said, go to it. We want you to do research, we'd like you to look at recidivism, but that's about all they had to say to me. That was my mandate. I came to the Sheriff's Department, as you can tell by my biography, from an educational and psychology background. I had no corrections experience. So I had to kind of find my way. I was blessed with a lot of great mentors, including Jack, people who I went to and asked questions. What is this? What should I be measuring? Basically, what is recidivism? And over the course of 13 years, with the great support of staff, and also I have the resources of a fantastic IT department, which allows us tremendous access to a lot of information and data about our population. I've just systematically built a system that has allowed us to really have a lot of great information about our offender population, what they're doing while they're with us, and now we're starting to move towards more of what they're doing once they leave us. Now, our primary goal in everything we do, as Jack said, we're trying to change people's behavior so that they do not come back to us, so that they do not recidivate. So that is basically the overarching goal for everything we do. And so that means that recidivism is the ultimate performance measure for us. How many people do end up coming back and how many do not? It really colors everything that we do. So we have undertaken an ongoing study of recidivism for our offenders since 1998. We follow all of our sentenced offenders for 3 years after they leave us. We can follow their paths in and out of the criminal justice system. Now we're beginning to build a database that's showing more of what they do aside from the criminal justice system. In other words, not just do they get rearrested, reconvicted, or reincarcerated, but are they accessing our services in the community? We've set up systems now where we can share information with our community providers so that we know whether someone successfully follows up on a referral that we've made. Are they running into barriers? Are there issues? How many people are coming into our after-incarceration support systems? Because basically the study of recidivism is more than just looking at a number of people who get rearrested or reconvicted or reincarcerated. It's really more of kind of putting together a 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzle for which you're not even sure you have all the pieces. And you don't always have that nice picture on the front of the box that shows you what it's supposed to look like when it's done. So it really is a matter of cobbling together a lot of information. Every one of our people, when they come in as pretrial detainees or as sentenced people, are administered an empirically validated risk needs assessment that gives us a very good idea of what are the issues that brought them to jail. It really focuses in on the primary issues that the body of research throughout the entire field, not just in Camden County, has shown are the best predictors that people are going to recidivate. And those are, do they have an adult history already? Do they have a juvenile history? Because the earlier they began engaging in antisocial behavior, the more ingrained those behaviors are, and so it puts them at higher risk to continue. Are they unemployed? Do they have an education? You know, do they have a high school diploma, a GED? Do they have any work history at all? Do they have criminal associates? And that, with our population, can span the globe from family members to peers to gang members, and especially for our women's population, in many cases, domestic partners, who are either bringing criminal activity into the home or are actually actively engaging in domestic violence. Substance abuse, as we alluded to, that's over 90% of our people are substance involved. And the large majority of them committed their crime under the influence or in seeking out their drugs. Personal emotional issues, which run the gamut from behavioral issues like inability to manage anger, impulsivity, those kind of things, manipulative behavior, all the way up through the entire spectrum to access one mental health, mental illness. Another very interesting piece that is a very strong risk factor is what's called non-rewarding parental. And that basically is assessing the type of relationships and the type of environment in which they were nurtured or not nurtured. So we're not really looking as much at, the quality of current relationships, although those are a piece, but who raised them? What kind of an environment was it? Was there DCF involvement? Was there abuse, neglect? An interesting stat, and I won't give you too many stats tonight, but a very interesting stat for us is that over 60% of our young minority men have no relationship with their father. And that just doesn't mean that mom and dad are divorced and they don't see dad very much. They actually either never met their father or they're completely absent from their life. And this is very, very, puts them at very, very high risk for antisocial behavior, seeking out of gangs, that sort of thing, which leads them to criminal behavior. And then finally, the other key criminogenic factor, criminogenic meaning crime-producing factor, is attitude supportive of crime. That they don't see how what they're doing is harming the community. So we're assessing all of these things. I gather a great deal of data about that, along with demographic data, information about the type of charges that they're in on, the length of sentence, all these things. And we feed all this into these different databases, and we're constantly analyzing that information. And when we do a recidivism study at the end of each year, I create a recidivism report. We're not just looking at how many people came back, but who came back, how did they come back, when did they come back? And we really are trying to piece together what are the issues that are bringing them back. Why, if we have this person here who has a very similar criminogenic profile and spent a similar amount of time with us, and this person, very, very similar. When they both get out, why does one recidivate and one does not? You know, we're trying to tease apart that mystery, and it's not always very clear. We really spend a lot of time looking at that. We track our rates, and actually we have been seeing over the last 10 years a very positive trend that as we have started to mandate programming for our offenders, and based on that and their participation in program, be able to move more people gradually down to lower levels of security in preparation for release. So they're stepping down from inside the main facility to a minimum security, then perhaps to a work release, and then if they qualify to a day reporting where they're living in the community at home or in a halfway house on electronic monitoring, and perhaps even already working. As we've increased the number of people that make it out to lower security due to their participation in programming and other things, at the same time, we've seen our recidivism rate drop significantly. So we're very pleased with that. We use all of the data that we collect not only as an institutional measure, but also as a diagnostic tool to help us understand how offenders flow in and out of the criminal justice system. We establish baseline rates for recidivism so that we can use them for evaluating programs. Really, we want to inform and support solid correctional practice, and we are very willing to share our information with other correctional agencies and spread the word. We just spent the day today down at the Department of Correction talking with the state prison system as well about reentry programs and what we've learned and what they've learned, and so sharing information. We do a lot of collaborating. And as we've entered into the fiscal crisis of the last few years, our ability to gather data and to have real-time information, hard data, has allowed us to respond to a lot of challenges with accurate and timely information. And it's also allowed us to clearly articulate our need for resources. So in a time when budgets are getting slashed and a lot of very important services are being cut, we've been able to go out and articulate not only need for budget money for the Sheriff's Department for us to keep our programs going, but also those of our partners in the community who are invaluable to us because they're the ones that are going to pick up the work that we've started when we release these people. So we've been able to, because we gather a lot of data and information, we are able to articulate the need for that funding for both ourselves and our partners. Finally, I'll just stop with a really quick story. When I first came to the Sheriff's Department in like the third month I'd been there, I was sent by the department to a conference. I think it was down south somewhere. I don't even remember where it was, but I happened to be sitting at the opening night's festivities at a table with, I was sitting next to a gentleman who was actually a retired judge from Virginia. And, you know, we were introducing ourselves, and I had my little name tag on that said, you know, Martha Lyman, because actually I didn't have my doctorate yet when I first started. I was still working on my dissertation. And he looked over at me, and it said Research Director, Hamden County Sheriff's Department. He looked over at me with this wonderful, genuinely Southern drawl and said, why in the world does the Sheriff's Department need a research director? You know, and I remember right then and there, I said, boy, I got a lot of work to do. And now, really, we are the only county in Massachusetts still that does any consistent collecting of data or measuring of recidivism. We're trying to bring our colleagues along, but it's been a long, slow process. But really, to us, if we didn't have our recidivism study that's been now ongoing, we have over 30,000 people in that study, we would feel like we were flying blind because we wouldn't know where we need to go, what we need to do, because it really informs a lot of our practice. Thank you.
If they can do it, I can do it. Can you hear me okay if I just use this? Okay. Great opening to tonight's events, and now this is a great segue into focusing a little bit on what some of those barriers and challenges to reentry are that the offenders face when they get released. Next, I would like to introduce Anthony Roberson, who graduated from Cambridge College in 2010, earning his bachelor's degree in human services. Anthony is also certified in substance abuse and mental health. He's been with the Hampden County Sheriff's Department for over 17 years, where he has held the positions of correctional officer, correctional caseworker, and counselor. He has worked on the substance abuse unit for the past 13 years, working directly with offenders with addiction issues and becoming the lead counselor, helping to manage the 28-day program, and he develops lesson plans and coordinates team treatment meetings. Anthony currently serves as the unit supervisor, monitoring the day-to-day activities on the unit and supporting the counseling staff and line staff. Anthony is also the pastor of a relatively new ministry in the Springfield area called the Fresh Anointing Ministries. Anthony is really doing some great direct care work with addiction. And again, as she alluded to, 90% of offenders have addiction issues, and anyone in the room who has worked in the field of addictions know it can be a very challenging population to work with. Lots of barriers to treatment, lots of triggers to relapse, and I'd like, without further ado, to have Anthony tell us more about that.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm so happy to be invited to this great forum to speak about the substance abuse unit and what we do behind the walls. I think it's very important work, and like Marty and Jack already explained, that there's a lot of groundwork to be done, and I just wanted to mention that word groundwork because that's what we're doing behind the walls. We're laying the groundwork and the foundation for further treatment to happen down the road. So our unit is comprised of a team. You can't get this job done unless you have a lot of team members. We're comprised of counselors and case managers who take individuals who may not know about addiction or recovery, and we educate them. We have a team who create lesson plans that are geared and centered around helping a person to change, individuals that may not even know that they need to change. So what we do is we do our research, we go out, we get the latest and updated information about addiction, the most current about the drugs that are out there, the dangers that people face in terms of addiction, and we educate them. We do that by mandatory classes and treatment, because as you know, a lot of times people won't go to treatment unless they're mandated to go. So what we do is we tell them this is what you need to do and this is what you're going to do. So once they do get there, we hold them accountable as well. To do what's necessary, because we understand that the final stages of this disease that we're talking about is death. So what we do is we set them up with case managers, counselors. We look at the severity of the problem. We take a look at all of their assessments, and we provide them with a service plan. And in that service plan, they have classes and they have programs that they're required to attend, even behind the walls. Because a lot of times people will say, well, why don't you wait until that individual gets down to minimum security or when they get released? Well, the sheriff's philosophy is that treatment and reentry starts day one. So we take individuals and we start teaching them and helping them to create a plan for reentry from day one. So it starts with the first day they come on the compound. We start gearing them up for classes, and we start educating them on what needs to happen, not only while they're in the jail system, but also when they get released. So we talk about things in the classroom that are going to be very, very important to them upon reentering the society. We talk to them about things like preoccupation with the drug. How much time are you spending thinking about using? How much time are you spending around people that are involved with drugs, right? All these things are important, right? And helping a person take a real comprehensive look at themselves and take a look also about what they need to do to change those situations. So we do that in the classroom setting just like we do in any other classroom setting. If they were in a college setting, they would listen to a professor, get information, and get handouts and get assignments and homework even. We give them homework as well that they're required to complete. So we're geared towards really having them take a look at themselves. And a lot of times that takes a team effort. It takes an effort in the classroom. It takes an effort in our classification meetings. It takes an effort when they're sitting down with a counselor doing one-on-one counseling. It takes group work because we don't just teach them in a psychoeducational setting, but we also have small process group work where the individuals will come in, they'll sit down, they'll talk about substances and how they affected them, and then also they're able to take that and use it in a presentation at the end of a program and really get the benefit out of it. So there may be people that have never received a certificate of completion. We're giving them certificates of completion in the jail. We're having them graduate from program to program. We start them off in a transitional program, which really gears them into just learning about the basics. Then we step them up into a program that even gets more in-depth about addiction. So see, we're unfolding things as we go along. And like I said in the beginning, the preparation and the groundwork is going to help individuals for when they go down to a lower security, a day reporting, a minimum, or even when they get out and they go to a AISS program out in the community. So I think what we do in the system is so important and valuable because, like I said, there's people that go out and they lose their lives to drugs and alcohol. It's a very serious disease and addiction that people have. So what we do is what we're doing is we're taking all the information that we're gathering about that individual, and we're really, really making further assessments as we go along to help that individual to lead a more productive, safe life, a life free from alcohol and drugs, right? And we do have people that do come back, and we're trying our best to help them to see that there is no need for them to come back, right? So we're looking at those aspects as well, helping them see that they can live a life free of drugs and alcohol. So we're always open. We're always presenting them with new material. We're always creating new lesson plans. We're bringing new programs in so that people will see themselves as they go further in the process, because this is a process. So people come in maybe not understanding about their own addictions, but when they leave, hopefully they'll understand a whole lot about addiction, how it's a downward spiral, how they can lose control of their lives, lose relationships, and they lose everything that they have. So what we're saying is that it's not necessary if you follow the plan, see? So what we're trying to do is help them to understand the need to have a plan in place right from the very start that can follow through, like Jack said, for the rest of their life. So it's very important work that we're doing, and I'm just happy to be a part of that whole process with the individuals, because what we're looking for is for them to come along with us. The sheriff always says, we can't do this work by ourselves. We need the inmates. We need these individuals to take a part and work on their own plan. So what we do is we take them, we have them take a look at themselves, in a comprehensive way. We have them explore, discover some things about themselves that they may not have even known, and then we put those things into place so that they can start the process of change, right? Because change is not easy. Most of our guys are in that pre-contemplative stage where they're not ready or they don't even know that they have these issues, see? So that's how strong that addiction is. A lot of them don't realize the impact that it's having on their lives. So we want them to be aware. We want that awareness piece to be very strong so that they have the information that they have to be successful, because that's what our goal is. Our goal is to have our individuals be successful in life, be productive, and to take their families back and be a part of society. That's the key. So I thank you for that. I'll just say that it's just an awesome opportunity to work with offenders and helping them change their life. You know, so thank you for inviting me.
John and his team certainly have a tough time, but as you can see, the passion and the dedication, and that's what it's all about. If you can connect with those individuals, you can start planting that seed of hope. Okay. And next we have Sally Johnson Van Wright. Sally is a 19-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department. She started as an intern back in 1993. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy from Smith College. After graduation, she worked for 5 years as a counselor, and during that time, she earned her Master of Social Work degree from Springfield College. She's a licensed independent clinical social worker and a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, and she also holds a national certification as a self-defense instructor. Over the years, she has held several positions, including intern, counselor, and several levels of management, including the Deputy Superintendent of the Women's Correctional Center, which she helped design and open 5 years ago. And that was no small job, was it? This past fall, Sally accepted a lateral transfer opportunity and became the program director of the After Incarceration Support Services program. She has a keen interest in addressing issues of violence, domestic violence, addictions, diversity, and mental health. She is a co-author of a chapter of the book Serving Mentally Ill Offenders and serves as an adjunct professor in graduate social work and teaches women and girls empowerment through the martial arts. I should probably note that she holds a 5th and 3rd degree black belt and recently discovered a love for Zumba. So mental note to myself, don't mess with Sally, she can take us all down. Okay. As always, it's good to see you. Come on up.
People always say that about the black belt. Really, it means let's walk out to the parking lot together because I got your back and I hope you got mine.
I do.
Thank you. This is past my bedtime, and I can't even tell it because there's so much energy and passion in this room. We love what we do. I hope you can feel that. And we are so grateful that each of you chose to spend your Wednesday evening with us because there's a lot of what we have to say that you just can't find on any cable channel whatsoever, right? So it is a rare and special place, Hampden County. We continue to try to share what we do so that what we do can happen in more places throughout the country. And we're just grateful to be here. If I have the right count, and we corrections people tend to count every place we go, so at last count, there were 66 of you. So you could just kind of take a look around and see the 66 people. That's the average size of a housing unit. So you could think of this group of folks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, institutional count, your time to go to the gym, your time to go to the library. You'd kind of get tired of each other, I think. But that just gives you a sense of the scale. Among the 66 people, and I will not ask anyone to self-identify, but I would imagine that among the 66 folks in attendance tonight, some have served time. And so I want to say to you, it's a good day today. You're here. Keep up the good work. It's also almost certain that in this room there are folks whose family member we have in custody, or whose neighbor or whose church family member we have in custody. And to you, I want to say we are doing our level best to help that person find his or her way. Because we also know that when your loved one came to jail, that was probably a day of great relief. Because for once, you know where he's at. You know where she's at. You know that they're safe. And there's a chance maybe they'll get it together. So we try everything we can to make that precious opportunity something that can be a turnaround for you, for your neighborhood, for your family, for your church family. So my job is to talk about the special needs populations, and there are many different ways to think about that. I'll start with how many people are in custody today. I just printed off today's count sheet. Right now, there are 1,455 individuals in the custody of Hampden County. So 1,455 people are there today. And of those, 1,052 are what we call behind the wall, or medium and maximum security, wearing a jail uniform, either green or orange. So about 1,000 of the about 1,400 are behind the wall. And that means about 400 of those folks who are in custody today are at some level of lower security. So maybe they are at a pre-release center or the alcohol treatment center. They may be in day reporting, where they wear a bracelet monitor around their ankle so we know where they're at all times. But there are various levels of beginning their reintegration already. Of the 1,455 people, how many are women and how many are men? 11% of them are women, that's 171, and the rest are are men, and that's 1,284. So that's about typical. Usually around 10 to 11% of any given incarcerated population is going to be female, and the remainder are the males. How many registered sex offenders do we have today? That's usually only on the Senate side, because if they haven't been found guilty of a crime yet, they're only being detained, then they're not going to be required to register, or we can't track that. But of the Senate's folks, there are 58 men and 1 woman. How many high-risk domestic violence folks do we have? We have 46, or about 5% of the Senate's people. How many people are in on gun charges? 221. It's a pretty high number, yep. How many people are we detaining or are serving a sentence in some fashion for a murder kind of charge? Sometimes it's called different things, murder, manslaughter, that sort of thing, but murder charges, there are 45. 40 of them are men, 5 of them are women. How many of the Senate's people are serving time for what's called dangerous crimes? So crimes which actually resulted in harm to another person, about 51%. So in some jurisdictions, you certainly will hear that the majority of people in jail are nonviolent drug-related offenders. That's not actually the case in Hampden County, and I think in large part that's because of a whole lot of effort that goes into pre-sentencing diversion. And gets people moved along the system. Because if they are a nonviolent person, we try to move them through the system at least twice as fast, because you don't want folks hanging out learning more bad stuff in jail, right? So you move them along. And I don't know if I said this already, I don't think so. For the women, that's still true. Of those folks in on dangerous crimes, 1 in 4 of those dangerous crime persons are women. So that's, as you see, an even higher representation than of those in custody. So just interesting. So that's who we've got in custody today. What I won't say about these 1,455 people is treat them all the same, because they're not the same. Look at the variety and diversity in this room right here. Very important that you look at the specific characteristics of the population that you have. What I also won't say is we should make it so uncomfortable to be in jail that they will learn their lesson and not want to go back. Why won't I say that? Because it doesn't work. Helping people stay out of jail requires that they learn something. And making them feel punished and feel bad about themselves doesn't help them to learn, doesn't help them to gain skills, doesn't help them to gain the kind of insight that where Anthony was talking about, some folks are pre-recognition of their own problems. They're not going to be able to see that unless it's not a nice place to be. Nobody's comfortable there, but neither is it a punishing place, as Jack had mentioned. The final thing I won't say about the group of people who are in jail is pity them or patronize them. They wouldn't stand for it anyway. Or excuse them or enable them. In fact, we have to look at what's going on, look at the pathway that led the person to jail, and see how can we help them to address the underlying factors that led to that incarceration. You make a difference along that factor line, you're going to make a difference in their recidivism. If I could prevail upon you, we're going to play a little game. Would everyone please, if you are able, just stand up right where you're at?
Leave it up to Sally to play games.
Okay, beautiful. So let's just play a what if. Let's say what if this was the group of individuals who left jail 1 year ago. So 1 year ago today, you all left jail. That's wonderful. Okay, wonderful. So can I get,
Sally, do you want the money?
no, everybody to this side of my arm, please sit down. Sorry you went back to jail. So that's the national average, about 50%, and you went back to jail. You probably relapsed to a substance. You may have become unstable with respect to a mental illness. You probably were homeless at some point, and you certainly, for whatever reason, returned to criminal activity, or at the very least, you did not comply with the conditions of your release. You went back to jail. The rest of you folks, okay, you still are making it, but that's still only half. Wow, okay. So you went back to jail. Let's see. Can I get everybody, let's see, the first 3 tables here, would you stand back up? Okay. So you did not go back to jail because that's the difference in the recidivism nationwide to Hampden County. So we just, if I did my numbers right, we went from about 50-50 1 year later to now 80% are staying out. And the 20%, you still had your relapse happen, you still had something happen to you, but the 20%. And so to the people who had to sit down but then stood back up, aren't you glad you came to Hampden County? This is not an infomercial, please sit down. So it matters what you do when you spend time behind a wall. And for Hampden County, we really look at, in all these ways that you've been hearing about, at how to address the underlying causes and how to help put the person in connection with resources that could help them stay out. If you address the pathway to the crime, you're going to address the pathway to recidivism and make an impact on that. We're trying to help people make a step towards change. Now, 1 year ago, when you left jail, you were, guess what? Kind of afraid to get out. Because as Jack had mentioned, you were safe while you were in jail. You weren't going to be abused. You were not going to be hungry. If something unsafe was happening, you could find a staff and let them know and get safe again. So coming back can be this mixed sort of bitter thing because folks can feel a little relieved. So what we want to do is try to help someone create even greater stability and be able to carry that stability out when they leave. How do we do that with various populations? And let me do a time check. Maybe a couple minutes? Yeah? Okay. So one population, and the one that I've worked with the most, has been the women. So women are the minority population within a jail setting, lots of special needs. One thing about when you think about incarceration, if the study doesn't say and women, it probably doesn't include the women. Any research that you see from Dr. Marty Lyman, it will say men and women, so we can see what the pathway is. Because the characteristics of the population of women and men are quite different. Women tend to come to jail, I'll just give one example, tend to come to jail 8 to 10 years later in the lifespan. And everyone who's taken a psychology course and everyone who's lived a life knows that the difference between 22 and 32, very big difference. Lot happens in our families, lot happens in addiction, lots happens with our health. There's a lot more loss. So you have to look at who's in jail and at what age. So we want to look at what's happening in the life cycle. Most of the women who come to jail are parents, so we have to think about the population behind our population, and that's the children of incarcerated, especially mothers, but also children of incarcerated fathers. The health and the mental health presentations of the women are very intense. We typically have like almost double the budget for mental health for serving that small portion of women than we have for the men. So again, within that time period, your PTSD has gotten that much worse, your bipolar has remained untreated, and if you've got some other stuff going on, it usually has progressed a little more. So the women are a special population in and of themselves, and we need to take a look at that. And as Marty mentioned, the domestic violence, again, 80% of the women who come to jail have experienced abusive relationships. That doesn't mean they're not responsible for the crimes for which they're incarcerated, but it does mean for them to get better, that has to be addressed. The trauma and mental health sequelae for people who come to jail, women and men, I put that together, trauma and mental health, not because it's always hand in hand, but it's very much related. The incidence of traumatic experience, usually early and often repeated for people who come to jail, is very, very high. If you look just at the instance of women who are incarcerated who self-report that they experienced sexual abuse before the age of 11, I think the figure is something like 79%, 75%, something like that. And that's a self-report. So it's a very, very high, much higher than the general population. And for the women and the men as well, the suicide rates, the rates of having attempted suicide, the rates of having someone very close to them who has committed suicide, again, very high and much higher than the general population. When we talk about people who have committed sex offense, that would be like today's real leper, right? Today's person that kind of everybody wants to put over there and not think about. And for very understandable reason, the crime of sex offense is very disturbing. It does intense harm. And yet, these folks too reach the end of their sentence. And in some way, you could see it this way. If everybody in all our neighborhoods said, not in my neighborhood, not in my neighborhood, not in my neighborhood, and even if in towns, and this has begun to happen, we started creating ordinances that said, not in my town, not in my municipality. It's too late to pick a big word like that to say in front of a whole group of people, right? Then what happens? People get pushed out to the margins. Then what do you have? People who have been committed sex offenses living under bridges, living in unstable situations, living where even if they are registered with the Sex Offense Registry Board, the police can't find them. You talk to any police who deals with sex offense folks in the communities, they'll say they want them to have a stable address because that's where they can keep tabs on them, that's where they can help keep the community safe. So there's a big housing issue and employment issue as well. When we talk with folks who come to after incarceration support systems and they come to try to get help getting back into the job market, every one of our staff will say it is many, many times more difficult to help find a job, help the person find a job for himself who has a sex offense history. Because, of course, he's got to disclose that. And the Sex Offense Registry Board is going to have that employer's address on the public record. So it's a very difficult thing. And yet, folks have got to go somewhere, and they got to make money somehow. And anyone who has ever earned money in some sort of illegal way, you don't forget that, right? So when you get really discouraged, people start to say, I'm just going back out on the street. I know how to do that. I know how to hustle. And we don't want to see that happen, so we try to head that off. Another group that we work with, a special group, is the high-risk youth offenders. People who are as young as 17 can be incarcerated in Massachusetts. So our 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, there's a bunch of that group right here. So I won't make too many generalizations, you know, what people say about the teenage brain and all that. I'm not going to repeat any of that. But we do find among the high-risk youth offenders, they can be highly impulsive. They have a very strong need to belong, which sometimes the gangs are an easy, ready-made answer for, which in the short run makes things better and in the long run makes things worse. So we do a lot of working with those folks and helping them begin to see another possibility and another pathway for themselves. So the last group I'll talk about is what we call the chronic recidivists. And these are folks who never commit a very serious crime, never serve much time, but I've known more than a handful of people who've done that sort of thing, and I've talked with them on her 17th or 19th or 29th incarceration. So this is low-level check writing, write a false prescription, larceny, shoplifting, that sort of thing. What we found out is these folks know how to come in and behave really well and comply with their service plan and do everything they're supposed to do, but never really address their issues underneath. And they never quite hurt anybody that much that they end up going upstate. In the state of Massachusetts, you can do up to 2.5 years. You're still doing county time. That's how we have 1,400 people. So it's got to be over 2.5 years before you go to state. So those kind of low level, seemingly low risks, that's not a low cost to the taxpayer because the taxpayer is paid for every one of those incarcerations. So we are doing a lot of thinking and a lot of strategizing. That's one of our more recent efforts to try to figure out how to make inroads into that particular pattern. So I'll close it at that, and thank you for your attention.
And last but certainly not least, somebody else who has a very challenging job, and that is dealing with the housing issues. One of the biggest gaps coming out of jail, you've been in jail 1, 2, 3, 4 years longer. Where do you live and who wants you as a neighbor? And Karen's going to give us some insight into that issue. Karen joined the Hampden County Sheriff's Department in 2005 as the housing specialist and case manager at the After Incarceration Support Services program. She was the 2009 recipient of the Quiet Hero Award, I love that name, which was awarded by Sheriff Michael Ash. Prior to joining the Sheriff's Department, she was a project director for the homeless program at the Massachusetts Career Development Institute. Some of you may know it as MCDI. Where she worked for 5 years and working with numerous housing programs throughout the city of Springfield. She concentrated on the homeless population once again. Prior to joining MCDI, she was the project coordinator at the Hampden County Employment and Training Consortium with the city of Springfield for 2 years, where she helped develop training programs and services for workforce opportunities in Hampden County. Prior to that experience, Karen worked in the business field with a successful career in recruiting, training, planning, operations, and communications. Karen received her bachelor's degree in organizational management from the University of Massachusetts. Clearly, another very busy woman. Karen?
I'm going to be, So thank you very much. So I have a very unique job. I want to thank Jack Fitzgerald. 8 years ago, I came to him and sold him a dream, and he took me. So, and it's unique because when you think about my job and you think about corrections, he designed my job, and it's probably unique in the country. So I'm just going to read you a quote, and it says, "Numerous research studies have confirmed that housing is a vital part of enhanced public safety as it relates to returning inmates," and I call them returning citizens. "In fact, housing is not simply a place to live, but a service in itself. It is perhaps the most critical service in leading to other services." So I work at the After Incarceration Support Systems. It's called AISS. We're located in Springfield at 736 State Street. Last year, we saw over 2,000 returning citizens come through our center. myself and my other colleagues saw over 500 individuals that needed housing services. So not just services based on homelessness, but on services based on stable housing. We also, at the after incarceration support systems, work with individuals that are in our custody. We go into each pod. We go into our main facility, which is medium, which Sally pointed out, with over 1,000 people. And then we go into all of our other centers. We go into the women's unit, we go into pre-release, we go into the Western Mass Correctional Institute, and we also go with day reporting. And what we do is we have reentry specialists that start and build relationships with individuals before they're released. And part of that relationship that we do is we build and we work with housing because it's vital, and we know that. And we know that not without stable housing, what's the end result? Like Sally pointed out, they're going to be hiding. They may recidivism. They may go back to drugs. So my job with the housing specialist is two things. Reentry begins on day one. And when reentry begins on day one, we have one of my colleagues, his name is Rich Devine, who could not be here tonight. He's the Director of Employment. Came up with a portfolio that we use inside. And Anthony pointed out with all the programming that we do inside and all the certificates that they utilize inside and that they earn, because we know that when you earn something, we can't take it away. So when I go behind the wall and I talk about and go into substance abuse, and we talk about that, we say, you need to take this portfolio and take everything that you've earned. And then when the baton is passed to me and all the great workers that I work with aftercare, I change it into a change person file. Because all the things that they learn and all the programming, we take all that learning and we utilize it on the outside. And that's where the magic begins. Because then with all the partners that we've built through our communities, we have over 200 partners. We have so many people that want to work with us that what we do is we take and we show that evidence base, that people have the programming and that we want them to apply it on the outside. And what we do is we provide intensive services in the community. Last year, now when we think about it, the sheriff charged us. Now, the sheriff doesn't have to build housing, and we're not building housing. But what he's doing is building community opportunities. And what we did is we took two small models, and we built a program called CHEST. It's Community Housing Earned, Safe, and Supportive. And we have two small housing units. It's a pilot program where we have 3 women living together, 3 ex-offenders. And in another house, we have 3 men living together, ex-offenders. And for the last year, this small program has proven extremely successful. The landlords love us. We're there every week. I talk to them every day because they call us. But what we're proving is that if they take the learning that we've done inside and they apply it on the outside, and with support that we can give them in the community, these individuals are working, they're going back to school, they're dealing with really major health issues and mental health issues, that we're saving lives, and we're reducing recidivism, and we're making taxpayers, and we're really enjoying our jobs. So for you young people that are out there and you're thinking about something to do, I'll tell you, there's so many opportunities you really can make a difference. I do this work because I believe people can change, and I want to thank you very much for your time.
Are they not an impressive group? Okay. Over the years, I used to work at the jail in forensic mental health services and became familiar with not just individuals, but the culture of the sheriff's department and the focus of rehabilitation and of trying to help people overcome these major obstacles, I think is unprecedented. They really do great work. They're busy. They are certainly not in their office eating bonbons all day. I can assure you your tax dollars are well spent with this crew doing the wonderful work that they're doing. For the sake of time, I didn't really stick to the 5-6 minute rule. I didn't send up those flares. But what they were saying was so fantastic, I didn't want to stop them, because I think what they were able to do is articulate what some of the needs are, and I think their passion comes out. I'd like to offer the panel, if anyone has some words or something you didn't get a chance to say or something you wanted to comment on. No? Okay. Well, one question that does come up quite frequently, and maybe Karen can comment on this. We were talking about it beforehand, and I think it's a question that a lot of people have, and I know it's a type of question that I've been asked. Why should all of our tax dollars go to things like housing and substance abuse? And Karen, do you want to address the housing issue? I want to give you a chance to respond to the need for housing and how it actually is performing an important function.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, as I said before, and I read that statement based on research, it's vital. You know, you have to think about, you know, I'm going home tonight to a home. My husband's there, my daughter's at college, so. And I have food in my refrigerator. I feel safe there. My next door neighbor, he's an ex-offender. He's living, he's safe, he's sorry for his crimes. And I don't judge him. And I believe that it's vital because it protects public safety. And that is why we're here, because it is public safety. And if we don't address it, the statistics Sally had you stand up today. How about if the 50% over here, you didn't have a home to go to? How about if you had to live in a shelter and you had to be in a wet shelter and you had to sleep with 160 people every night, and somebody had to tell you what you had to eat, and you had to be out at 7 in the morning and line up at 5 o'clock at night. And if you didn't line up, you would not have a bed. What would you do? Some of you may not decide to go back there. You may have to do things so that that may not be the best behaviors. So you have to think about it. Our job also is to reduce homelessness. By providing housing, you reduce homelessness. It's expensive to this state. Now, I could be wrong, and Jack could say this, but right now, I think, how much does it cost to house one offender?
I believe the annual rate now in the county is about, just around $40,000 a year. And
40?
that's inside.
Wow. So how much does it cost to house somebody? How much does it cost? You have to think about a rent. So if I was going to have somebody, you know, with rent and they were working and helping, and so I'd rather have somebody pay $500 a month for rent, which is, you do the math, of $6,000, instead of being in jail, which is $40,000. So we're saving taxpayers a lot of money. So, so it's very vital. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And one other question before we open it up to Q&A, and I don't know, maybe Sally, that this one might be coming your way. Although she does have the black belt, maybe I should give it to someone else. Over the years, the Sheriff's Department has been providing gender-specific programming that's geared towards addressing some of the unique needs that males and females have. And I know, Sally, you've worked with both populations. You've worked with the women for many years. You've worked with the men. Do you want to address why it's so important to have gender-specific programming in the jails?
Yes. Yes, I'd be happy to. We're a highly gendered culture. We still dress our baby girls in pink and baby boys in blue. And most of our vocational tracks tend to be majority women, majority men, right? So isn't the pathway to crime gendered. Women, as I had mentioned, go to jail generally later in life than men. They have, in general, a slightly more homogeneous set of crimes. There's much more variety among the crimes among the men Fair to say, Marty?
Yes,
Yeah?
it is.
Okay. And the life experiences are very important. So if someone who's coming to jail, let's say, has fathered children but never had contact with them, there is a parenting issue there, and we do address that. But the woman who comes to jail and has mothered children and had custody of those 4 or 5 children right before she came to jail, whatever you may say about how well she was doing meeting the needs of those children, they were who she was who they were counting on. You have to address that parenting issue differently. And then with respect to domestic violence, there are some women who have battering behaviors, and we're addressing that. And by and large, the women were the ones who were the victims of domestic violence. And the men come to jail, by and large, presenting that they feel victimized and they feel like it's all her fault. She did this to me, but the battering and abusive behavior was actually his. So you must address those two problems in really different ways, and they've got to fit the life experience of each population.
Very good. Okay. Any last-minute comments from any of the panels?
Yes, every crime has a victim. We know this, and I would imagine that in this room, some tragically high number of us have been close to a person who was victimized by a crime or may have been victimized ourselves. So a big part of what we do that just we hadn't mentioned, but it runs as a thread through all of the programmatic work that we do, is helping people to see the ripple effect of their crime and see the impact of their decisions and behaviors on other people and how that ripples out. That is going to help them to take responsibility and be accountable, and then they can begin making positive ripples.
Yeah.
Great
Many
point.
of our people tend to have very egocentric worldview, especially when they come to us. And so part of what we're doing with the programming we're doing is they have a very egocentric view, and yet they have a very external locus of control. They feel like, oh, it happened to me. I didn't have anything to do with it. External forces brought me there. And a lot of that has to do with their denial around substance abuse and everything else. And so that's one of the first things that we're addressing with programming, is breaking down all of those views and those attitudes, and getting them, before you can get them to open up to really work on their issues. You've got to break down those barriers, and that the ripple effect on the victim impact is very. We do a pre and post test with our victim impact people, and one of the key concepts in victim impact is that ripple effect that Sally referred to. Is and one of the first questions we ask is what was your crime? And most of the time they'll say they'll list it honestly. What are you in for? But then you ask, who was victimized? And on the pretest especially, the predominant answer is, the first thing they say, me. Why? Because I'm in jail. So I'm the victim. And then they might say, oh, well, my family, because they miss me. See the me? Me. And then if you ask if there was anybody else victimized, and usually they don't see it. Or they'll talk about their extended family. Well, my grandmother or my what. It's all about me. After the program, we start to see more, oh yeah, the person I punched, or the person whose money I stole, and this and that, and then starting to get them to see the ripple effect. It wasn't just their immediate victim, but it was, if they stole, well, it was the business, now the community doesn't feel safe, or whatever, those ripple effects. But it takes a lot of work to get them to that place. And so it's, like Sally said, we realize that victimization is key, and that's a piece of every program we do, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's anger management, domestic violence, and even talking about employment and all this and that. They need to really understand that dynamic before they can be successful in any of the programs.
Absolutely, and as Anthony alluded to, what a team effort that it takes, whether it's substance abuse, mental health, employment, housing, and the level of collaborations is amazing. I'd like to open it up to questions and answers from the audience. Anybody?
Are there still courses taught at the jail through SDCC's continuing ed program?
Yes.
How many, or what percent of the 1,450 or so take advantage of those courses?
I believe that Dan said last year we had something like almost 300 people in one college course or another. Some are at STCC, and then the women's facility have some other.
And for that particular group, what is the recidivism rate?
Very low, very low.
Yep. Education is one of the biggest factors that send somebody's likelihood of reoffense down. Yep.
Great question. Other questions? Yes.
My question is for Mr. Roberson. How often are psychological disorders and substance abuse co-occurring, and how hard is it to differentiate them?
Great question.
Yeah, that's
I'm a CJ and psych person.
Oh, yeah. That's a great question, because what I really want to say is that we're dealing with a lot of people that have dual diagnosis. As you know, they have the substance abuse as well as the mental health. And I'm not sure of the statistic in terms of how many people are dealing with it, but it's pretty high in terms of people that are addressing both issues at the same time. And it's a very important factor, right, when we're treating individuals, because we have to look at what's going on, you know, while the person is getting substance abuse treatment and their mental health. As a matter of fact, we have a clinician who comes on our unit and is involved with us in the treatment process. They come to our classification meetings, and they're meeting with clients on a regular basis to help them in terms of just, you know, normal daily activity, and also dealing with the things that may come up while they're in the classroom dealing with their substance abuse. So thank you for that question. It's a very good question.
What a great question. Other questions, comments, concerns? We'll take them all tonight.
Hi there. I'm an employment coordinator here in Springfield, and a large population of the people that we work with, you know, a huge barrier that they face when getting employment is their Corey.
We all listen to us all, we're all like, Corey, right?
Yes. Is there, you know, a magic list that the Sheriff's Department has of employers who are kind of more willing to work with people who are ex-offenders?
Superb question, because one of the greatest interventions we have to knock down recidivism and therefore knock down crime and the creation of new victims is a job. Employment goes more than halfway. So do we have a list of employers who like to work with us and to hire our people? Yes, we do. What they like is the fact that we can screen people a whole lot better than any employer can. We get the CORI. People may not be familiar. The CORI is the criminal record. It's the record of criminal activity in a person's life, and you know, employers often will use it to screen people out, not only of employment but also housing. You always have to remember that the CORI is, which started out, interestingly enough, as a law to protect privacy, has become a weapon that has been used against people who have paid their debt to society, if you will, and are trying to keep away from crime. But yeah, these employers, we get a fuller CORI than they do. Plus, we've had the benefit of having them as our guests for extended periods of time. We get to know them very, very well. And we work very closely with the employers. What else the employers like besides our screening is that whenever we place somebody, we don't just leave them there and do this. They know that we're on the other end of the line. All they have to do is pick up the phone, and we have the capacity to intervene, you know, in some very significant ways, hopefully before things get to a crisis, sometimes after. And we have even functioned sometimes. I'll never forget one case where we had somebody who was working on one of our painting crews while they were still in custody. We have crews that work out and do work in the community under contracts with various entities. One guy was working and in fact was hired by City Hall. After having painted at City Hall, you should have seen us hold our breath when they were going to go over to paint the police station, when they were going to go over to paint the DA's office. I bit my nails a lot in those days. But a fellow was hired by the city at City Hall, was a custodian for a while. He relapsed. Even after he was out of custody, he was done with probation. They called us. One of our job developers went out, found him, got him into treatment. The city held his job, got him back, and that was it. That was the only relapse that happened, and he'd been there for now 5 years. So, yeah, we have a lot of employers who are very happy to work with us, and mostly for those reasons. We can test and assess and match people whose aptitudes go with the work that employer needs. Oh, there's also a tax incentive. There's a very big tax incentive for hiring an ex-offender. There was, I could tell you some about, one of the frustrations that I have and I sense my colleagues have tonight is that there's so little we can tell you and that how much we would love to tell you about the things that we do and the things in the interest of public safety that you maybe don't know about. Maybe I'll quickly tell you a couple. You know, text a tip. You know, text a tip. You see the commercials on TV and so forth. People are afraid, you know, if I come forward and drop a dime on somebody, boy, you know, what's going to happen to me? We have a system set up where one can text to a specific phone number. That text message goes to Canada, where it is outside the reach of any jurisdiction or any public data mining company or any court subpoena or court order or anything else, where the identifying information is stripped from it, and the essence of the tip is sent back to our central control office, where the officer examines it and then passes that information on to the local police jurisdiction that's appropriate. That's one little partnership we have. Another is we've opened up our databases. We are a tremendous repository of information. For example, police departments started with Springfield and now it's throughout the state. If, say, a police officer responds to a robbery in the street and the victim says, yeah, you know, the guy had a rose tattoo on his left forearm, that cop can call into the station. They haven't got it in the onboard computers yet in Springfield, but they're about to. The cop calls in, the records room gets onto our website with a passcode that they have, and they can get into our database, and up on their screen will come anybody who's ever been in our jail with that marker on them. And then bang, into that person and get his or her whole repertoire, let's say, of criminal justice history, who were his or her playmates in the jail, who were the cellmates, who put money into their commissary, who visited them, addresses, all of that information. Tremendous help to the police. Conversely, on the other side, the treatment side, see, there's a dynamic here all the time. It's public safety and it's rehabilitation. It's the gun and the Bible. It's both. We have an analogous system set up whereby social service agencies in the community can register and get a password to come onto our net, and on the other side, they don't get the criminal stuff. What they get are the evaluative data, the educational stuff, the treatments, the assessments, the release plan, those things that we thought were incomplete when the person went back into the street. So if they're being referred back out, they can get that information with the offender's permission. We cannot release that information without permission, so there's a checkbox that the inmate can indicate, allowing us the freedom to do that. So if somebody's leaving us and going for mental health or substance abuse or employment or name it, services, they can get that information so they don't have to start from scratch. They have all of the information that we've been able to gather in that time, so that when the person comes out in the street, you know, as was said, Anthony said we lay the groundwork inside, but it would be a horrible waste of the sweat and tears that our people put in behind the wall, a terrible waste of the money that the taxpayers put into it, if we just blessed ourselves when they left and said, thank God nothing happened while we had them. That would be crazy. So we follow them into the community, and we continue with everything that was done. It's one thing to be clean and sober if you're locked up in the jail, but it's another if you're walking that street where you used to turn tricks or deal. It's a totally different story. So we have to keep those supports there, keep the supervision, keep the support, treatment interventions there, to keep people paying taxes and not creating new victims.
Response. I think we have time, maybe squeeze in one more question, if anyone has one. Any? Okay.
If anybody dares at 9:30.
How long do you think it'll be before the Homeland Security Department finds out that you're sending stuff to Canada and cleaning it up and keeping it confidential in order that it no longer be confidential and the people in charge of perpetrating the program will be duly admonished?
No. I have no idea. However, what happens is, don't forget that that information gets right back into, without the source, the information for the police and the whether it be FBI or whoever it be, gets to that situation to investigate it and get those people before the court. Great question. Love to see what happens if that came to a court case.
Oh, go ahead.
I know we're going to close, but I just wanted to give a little quick advertisement, public service announcement. Just to let you know, one thing that we have going in Hampden County, and it's being looked at not only statewide, but even nationally, we have what we call a reentry task force in Hampden County, where we come together every other month, and it's a true partnership. I know Diane comes to them as a member of the academic community, but it's chaired by the sheriff, but it brings together representatives from the Department of Correction, from probation, from parole, from the local police departments, from the district attorney's office, the United States attorney, as well as a lot of the service providers that we work with in the community. The Behavioral Health Network, the Regional Employment Board is there, and a number of the other service providers. And we come together and we're constantly talking about the issues around reentry. What are the barriers? What are the new programs? Are there new grant opportunities out there? How can we continue to share information more? I know we partner very closely with the Springfield Police on the Safe and Successful Youth Initiative, on the Shannon Grant to try to both intervene and suppress crime. In Holyoke, the South Holyoke Initiative, and another Safe and Successful Youth Initiative up in Holyoke. We're constantly partnering with the community because the Sheriff's Department is part of the community. These people are the citizens of our communities, and they are coming back to the communities as returning citizens. Even the ones that go upstate, they spend a lot of time with us while they're awaiting trial, and they get sentenced to the state. We take a lot of them back if they're going to return to Hampden County. Now, as you all know, there are no state prisons in Hampden County. There's no state prisons west of Worcester. I believe Gardner is the closest one, and the women's facility in Framingham. So these people that have gone upstate to state prison have really been completely cut off from the community. But now they're coming back here. They're coming back to live. And years ago, they used to just be put on a bus when their sentence was over, and back they came, and whatever happened, happened. Now we have a partnership with the Department of Correction where people can apply to come back down here towards the end of their sentence and re-enter through our jail. And they come back and they become just like one of our inmates. Because they are returning citizens to Hampden County. And so we know, we have our hands on them, we know who they are, we know where they're going. We put together a release plan because everyone that leaves Hampden County has a release plan that has referrals to meet the needs that remain unmet for housing, for employment, for mental health or substance abuse services. So we do the same thing for the people that are coming back to us from the state prison. And I think that's important for you to know because we really feel, the sheriff really feels a responsibility to have knowledge of everyone that's coming back into our community. And we also inform the police departments of everyone that's being released, so there's the public safety side of it as well. So each PD gets a list of who's coming out in the next month, so they know, and where they're going. And so it's just important to know that this is a true partnership, as Jack says, on both the public safety and the human service side, because we know you can't do one without the other.
Thank you, very well said. I would like to end this event with one very quick anecdote. A couple months ago, you might remember we had that really cold snap. It was like -0 when you got up in the morning, very cold time. And you need to keep in mind that this type of philosophy and this type of leadership comes from the top down. And we have a very innovative sheriff and Sheriff Michael Lash. And at the meeting that Dr. Lyman was talking about, the Regional Reentry Task Force meeting, I really have to give him credit. He started off the meeting saying, "Good morning, everybody, and today we need to think of our homeless people." And he called on Bill Miller from Friends of the Homeless to give a report, and yes, the numbers in the homeless shelters are
There were
up.
184 people in shelter that night.
184 people in the shelter that night, if you couldn't hear it. And the reason why the sheriff might make a comment about the homeless is because he knows some of the people that leave their care and protection end up homeless, which is why Karen's department is so, and her work is so important. And the mental health issues, if they can't get access to medications or follow-up treatment, and the substance abuse. So I think that was just a really affirmative moment for me when to hear the sheriff start off his meeting saying we need to think of the homeless and what a ripple effect offenders coming out into the community have. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I want to thank both the audience and the panelists tonight. I think this was wonderful and great questions. And if we can give them a round of applause for their time.